Hello everyone, Shabbat Shalom. This week's parasha is Parashat Vayechi. And if we look, I want to discuss the main topic, and the main topic in this parasha is obviously Brachot, blessings. We see the blessings that Yaakov Avinu gives his grandchildren and his children. But really, when we look at the last few parashot, the last few weeks and really months, we see this process of our legacy being brought down from generation to generation. The messages that our forefathers have given and have decided to pass on to the next generation, to their children, their grandchildren, and so on to the whole nation, and really to the entire world. There are many ways to interpret the messages and the stories in the Torah, and I think that really touches upon the richness of the text, because I believe that commentary books will be written forever, and really we always have relevant messages to understand from the beautiful text. And as long as it's bringing us closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and closer to the people around us, I believe that they all have sound truth in them. So in terms of the concept of a bracha, a blessing, specifically given by a parent to a child, this is something that is extremely familiar for most affiliated Jews on a weekly basis. And this moment, this weekly moment, to some, both parents, in my personal family, we had both my parents, my mom and my dad used to still give us on a weekly basis. If it's not in person, it's by phone. They do give us a bracha. And this moment in our week is a very, very special and intimate moment between a parent and a child. And when I looked up, the origin of this minhag, it's interesting because it really only dates back to the end of the era of the Achronim. And during that time, it was mainly taken upon as a Kabbalistic minhag, and not by all of Am Yisrael. Later on, we all took it on, and most homes have this ritual on a weekly basis. There are certain occasions during the year that we also have brachot, and obviously before a trip or someone's getting married, and so on and so on. The more the merrier. But on a weekly basis, we all agree that this is a Jewish ritual. When you look into the Kabbalistic meaning or understanding behind this weekly occasion, they bring such a beautiful idea. And they tell us that the reasoning for this bracha that a parent gives a child is to form a connection. Every week, we go, the relationship between a parent and a child isn't always easy. And sometimes, even if it is, there are many things that happen during the week. People are busy, people are working, people are at school. And this moment is a moment where we stop. We have this moment with the one child. We look at them, we hold them, and we give them a blessing. And if we are mindful, we tap into the message of that blessing, that general kind of like nationwide blessing. But we also bless them. We also give them our own personal blessing. And this, in terms of the Kabbalistic idea, forms this beautiful build-up of a connection. That there won't be a week that goes by that a parent and child don't have that moment where they recognize each other, they acknowledge each other, they see each other. And this falls extremely true, both in the experience that I had in my own personal home, Baruch Hashem, and the experience that Yair, my beloved husband, and I have in our own home that we are building, Be'ezrat Hashem. And we have 3 wonderful, beautiful children, 2 boys and a daughter. And we get to bless both with the male and female version of the parent's blessing. And every week we do this, we give the bracha, but we add to the bracha, and we speak about a certain light that we noticed during that week, something that they did, something beautiful that I or my husband appreciate about them. And we also often speak about a challenge that they were having, if it is, being better at doing homework or setting up the night before, or, cleaning up after dinner, or speaking nicely to the sibling. Whatever it is, we speak about both, the challenges and the beauty that we see in them, specifically for that week. And this is something we took upon ourselves. I don't know when exactly, but this is something that we do on a weekly basis. And when looking into this parsha and really just reading the pshat, I noticed, I'm embarrassed to say because I didn't really notice this beforehand, that this is exactly what Yaakov Avinu does. And maybe this is exactly what we need to do. And it's not just a nice gesture, but it's exactly what we do. He looks at his children, he looks at his grandchildren, and he sees them. He sees what is. He sees them for who they are, and he gives them a blessing in accordance to what they are, their traits, their strengths, and their weaknesses. And his brachos are not always, nice, and some of them are pretty harsh and pretty, raw. But that's exactly the point. Yaakov sees what is. He's not, simplifying it or fluffing it up. He sees the strengths. He knows the weaknesses. And through that knowledge, he gives them the bracha for the future. He acknowledges it and he points that out. And I think that's really incredible. Now, there's many things to say about each and every one of the brachot, but I want to focus on two parashiot that talk about brachot that parents gave their children. One from this parasha, but I want to start with one from Parashat Tolda that we learned quite a few weeks ago. And there we see the bracha or the brachot that Yitzchak wants to give his children. He wants to give Yaakov and Esav brachot. And I want to just focus on this, and obviously this is one interpretation. There are many, but I want to focus on this interpretation. So when you look at this parasha, you could learn a lot. And you see that Yitzchak Avinu wants to give the brachot to his children. And he obviously wants to, we all know that he wants to give the leadership, bracha of the leadership, to Esav. Now this parasha, on a moral level, has always been a little bit disturbing. The behavior of Rivka Imenu and Yaakov Avinu is slightly problematic. And I don't mean to criticize Chas v'Shalom. Obviously, they are our leaders. But the criticism doesn't come from judgment. It comes from trying to understand what the message is. What am I supposed to learn from this encounter? What am I supposed to learn from the story specifically? And to me, the fact that there is place to understand that maybe there was misbehavior doesn't show to me that these people were less worthy or less righteous. It actually shows their relatability and shows how human they were. And if they weren't, how would we be able to really, essentially, on a practical level, look up to them? So to me, the fact that we can criticize certain behavior shows the humanity side of things. And I always did question this parasha because, morally speaking, it didn't make sense to me. Rivka Imenu essentially was deceitful. Yaakov Avinu as well. And it made no sense to me in terms of like the traits that we learn from Rivka and Yaakov. So something here didn't fall straight. When I learned this message from Rav Yaakov Nagen in his beautiful book, Leitorer Liyom Chadash, about Parashot. And he brings this idea from the Zohar, I hope I understood it correctly, and he brings this idea from the Zohar that surprisingly explains and describes the suffering that Yaakov goes through in his life as a midah keneged midah for his misbehavior. And this is very interesting. He shows he goes one by one with his mistake versus kind of like the counter response of his life suffering. And it shows in terms of, how we understand what happened, in terms of the bracha, I truly, and not only myself, but we believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu essentially believed that that was meant to happen, and the bracha was given to Yaakov, and Hashem was okay with that happening. If Hashem didn't want it to happen, there would be some form of occurrence that Yitzchak would have noticed, which I believe he did, and something would have changed and it wouldn't have happened. Okay, but the fact that it did happen, the fact that essentially Yaakov did get the bracha and the brachas were switched, essentially means that Hashem was okay with what happened. But it doesn't mean that Hashem was okay with how it happened, with how Yaakov or how Rivka made it happen. And Rav Yaakov Negen in his Perush explains that essentially the purpose never can justify the means. Meaning, even if we have the right intention, even if we have, we're doing the right thing, the way we do it is extremely crucial. And that's in terms of, Yaakov and Rivka's behavior. But I want to focus, in terms of this parasha, I want to focus on Yitzchak. Yitzchak, if we understand this parasha correctly, is seen a little bit like, underestimated. I don't believe, and I believe that others also, the Orach Chaim HaKadosh has this beautiful, beautiful parish on Yitzchak's side of things. It says in the Psukim, Vayikehu enav, and we commonly understand it as Yitzchak was blind. Yitzchak couldn't see. Okay? But Yitzchak wasn't, Yitzchak was still extremely, extremely mindful of what was going on. And I don't believe he wasn't aware of what was happening. Yitzchak himself saw his children and he knew exactly who they were. He knew that the next leader of Am Yisrael, the next in line, is his child. And that child needs to lead the rest of Am Yisrael. And he knew that. And he knew that a leader had to have two traits. He knew that he had to have chesed and he had to have gevura. And he looked at both his children. And he said, Yaakov has chesed. Gevura with maturity, he will come to have. I'm not worried about Yaakov developing that gevura. Esav has so much gevura, but chesed is his weak point. And it's not easy for him to develop that chesed. According to the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, it's so beautiful, it's so sweet. Yitzchak believed that essentially, if he would have seen that in Esav, if he would have been able to encourage that in Esav would have developed the chesed. And if Esav would have developed the chesed, and that is why Yitzchak wanted to give him the bracha, so that Esav can develop the chesed, so that Esav can acknowledge that his father sees the potential, even when the potential is not even practically seen at all. Yitzchak believed in his son. He believed in that ability of Esav to develop that chesed within him. Yitzchak essentially believed that not only can Yaakov lead the Jewish nation, but maybe instead of us knowing Esav as Esav a Rasha, we would have eternally known Esav as Esav a Tzaddik. And together with Yaakov, they would have built a dynasty of leadership. And according to the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, this could have been an option. This could have happened. But because of how things turned out to be, Yaakov took the bracha. And we see on other occasions, according to the Midrash, that Esav kept trying to get into the family. He was essentially supposed to marry Leah, and he could have been paired up with Dinah, and Yaakov didn't want it. But the Orach Chaim HaKadosh says that if he maybe would have married Leah HaTzadeket or Dinah HaTzadeket, they could have brought out that potential within Esav, and that could have manifested into that same form of leadership. So in reality, this could have happened. The fact that it didn't happen meant that that what happened was okay. Hashem essentially allowed for what happened to happen because he believed in it. But this is an important message to us. We need to understand that what happens in life, we could say that it's meant to be. But there are certain things in life that could have been, but because of man and not because of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because of man, they didn't come to be. And what I want to learn from Yitzchak is his incredible ability to educate, his incredible ability to dream beyond what's seen. He might have been blind in the present, but he had this gift of Enei Mashiach to foresee, to have this prophecy of what potentially can be, even if it didn't manifest into reality. He saw his son, he knew exactly who his son is, and he knew exactly who his son can be with the right encouragement and embrace. He followed the lines of Chanoch Hana'ar al pi darko, educate the child in accordance to his path. When you see your child and you see your child taking a certain path, don't shove him into a different path because that's your path or because that's the path you believe to be the righteous one. Educate him right there in the path that he has chosen to take. It's not an easy task, and I'm just stepping into that reality with my own children. But that is what we learn from Yitzchak Avinu. The ability to not only see the potential in what we see right now, to see the potential in what actually can be, in what we're choosing to believe in our children. So that's message number one. The other bracha that I would like to focus on is Yaakov Avinu's bracha. Yaakov Avinu's bracha to his grandchildren, the first bracha that we see in this parasha. And he speaks to his grandchildren. And again, there's kind of like a shift in what we naturally would see. We naturally see that in terms of lineage, in terms of legacy, the firstborn has this priority. Whether it's fair or not, that's the reality. I do think that we have evolved as a society and it's not as rigid. But in the past, it was so rigid that in terms of property, in terms of all kind of like passing on of the family name, it all went to the firstborn. And definitely during those times of history. And Yaakov Avinu takes his two grandchildren, and Menashe and Ephraim. Menashe is the oldest grandchild of the oldest child of Yosef, sorry. And he's the oldest in the family, in Yosef's family. And Menashe, according to Chazal, was a good son. He was he honored his father. He stood by his father's side. He helped him in his business in Mitzrayim. He was a righteous Jew. He was a good person. He's a wonderful human being. And Ephraim was a second child. And essentially, he had no need to step forward. He had no need to kind of like lead in his own way. He was a son of Yosef. He had enough reason to sit comfortably and not have to work hard. He had that name for himself. But Ephraim didn't do that. Ephraim sat and he learned Torah. He learned so much Torah. He learned with his grandfather in Goshen, with Yaakov Avinu. And he sat and he sat and he sat till he finally exceeded, on a spiritual level, he exceeded his brother. And according to some commentary, that's the reason why Yaakov really gave the blessing to Ephraim, with priority to Ephraim. Said, Yevarechecha Yesimcha Elokim ke Ephraim v'cha Ephraim first, to really give us this message that it doesn't really matter what life circumstances have given you. It doesn't really matter what you were born into. It matters what you make of your own situation, what you make of the circumstances that were given or laid upon you. There are certain things in life that you can't control, but there is so much in life that you can control. And in terms of your own legacy and in terms of your own ability to create in the world, it's really essentially up to you. And we look at that bracha, that's the message that I want to take. And with these two messages, I understand, and we could really look into every single bracha that we learn, that we could learn from, that there's a message. There's a message. There's hundreds of messages that we could take. But what this essentially means to me is that blessings or words aren't arbitrary. We all know this. Every single parsha means something. Everything that is said means one thing. Everything that isn't said means another thing. So we learn from that. And now I want to focus on what is relevant to my students, to my daughter. The bracha of the female version of the bracha that we give our children. So when you look simply at the bracha, it seems pretty natural. Yes, of course, we want to bless our daughters with the blessing of our mothers, right? Of course we do. But if that was naturally just like kind of, naturally what we would have done, we would have expected that the male version of the bracha would be Yisimcha Elokim ke Avram, Yitzchak and Yaakov. But that isn't the case. The bracha for the men is really taken from our parsha, from the bracha of Ephraim and Menashe and Ephraim, right? To essentially tell us, and really when you look at that parsha, it's worded extremely strangely. It's worded in a way and form that we could take the bracha as is, written in the psukim, and utilize it today. We didn't change the pasuk. It's written in a way that's really essentially speaking about generations to come. Yisimcha Elokim ke Ephraim and Menashe is giving a blessing to Ephraim and Menashe, but he's really talking. Who's he talking to? So the way it's formulated is it's formulated in a way that's fitting for generations to come. So I realize that if that's the message that we're giving our children, our boys and men, it has to have like a similar understanding for the female version. And when I tried to look back for the origin of the bracha of Yisimech Elokim ke Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, I found there wasn't a lot said about it in terms of text, biblical text. The only time that I found that it's stated in the Tanakh is in Megillat Ruth, where there's Kenim and the Am tell Boaz when he essentially bought Ruth and was going to marry her. The whole parsha of Yibum. So this Kenim bless Boaz, and they tell him that this woman that he's bringing into to their house should be like Rachel and Leah, the mothers of the 12 tribes. And in Masechet Brachot, Rashi explains and he adds on to that, and he says, you can't bless someone with only some of the imahot. You have to bless someone with all the four imahot. And maybe, and I believe that's probably the origin for why we bless with all the Arba Imahot. It still doesn't explain specifically why the Arba Imahot. We could have been blessed like Dvorah. We could have been blessed like Miriam. We could have been blessed like many other, not many, but other women in the Tanakh. We could have been blessed like Ruth. But why specifically that? And I tried to look for some form of source that speaks about it, and I couldn't find it. So I knew that I had to come up with it myself. And I hope that this generates a lot of commentaries as to why, what is the message in this specific bracha to our daughters. So when you look, and I took really the most simple understanding of the brachot, of the bracha, because really it's pshat. I don't think it's not too far-fetched. You look at all the imahot. There are so many midot that we learn from the imahot. From Sarah, I'm taking a few of the midot. There are many, but I'm just taking from some of the stories that we learn. From Sarah, we learn about Hachnasat Orchim. We learn about her extreme generosity. Way before they were able to create their own family, they were welcoming strangers into their home. They were doing kiruv work. And Sarah was welcoming that into her home. We learn a lot of other things, but that's one thing I know essentially. From Rivka Imenu, we learn the importance of chesed, but not just simple chesed, whereas someone asks you to do them a favor and you do it. You don't do only, from Rivka, we learn that we don't only do what someone asks us to do, we do what someone needs us to do, and we do it happily, and we do it willfully. We also learn the stamina that Rivka Imenu lived in a house of wicked people, and she was able to withstand her own moral value, her own righteousness, against this wickedness all around her. And from Rachel, we learn a lot of forgiveness. We learn humility. We learn the ability to, be mevater, allow for other people to come in, even though it means that we ourselves are going to be, hurt by it. And from Leah, we learn the beautiful trait of Hakarat Tov. She's the first person documented to be grateful to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What a beautiful thing. And there are many other things, as I've mentioned, that we could learn. But we learn these beautiful things, these beautiful midot. There's this idea that I learned from my dear friend Rebbetzin, the holy Rebbetzin Shani Tarragon. And she once told me this notion, and I keep it dear to my heart. She told me about friends, and she compared it to a bouquet of flowers. And she said, some people like their flowers to match each other. But she said she loves tropical and beautiful and colorful and different flowers. She doesn't need her bouquet to be kind of matching. She wants it to just be filled with glory. And she says that she compares it to friendships. And in her friends, she sees many different attributes and traits. And this bouquet kind of encapsulates all that. And she says her friends are like a bouquet of flowers. One friend she likes to talk to. Another friend she likes to learn with. A third friend she likes to cook with. Another she likes to walk or run with. And she has, or laugh with. And she has all these different friends that really kind of essentially meet a certain part of who she is. And she doesn't need each one of her friends to meet all those qualities. She has different friends for different things. And she learns from each one of her friends. And that kind of creates that within herself. And I remember this and I hold it dear to my heart because Rebbetzin Shani Tarragon, she really does make every person she meets like they are the most important thing to her. And they are her friends. And the Rebbetzin is my friend, a very dear friend, even though we don't see each other a lot. That doesn't really matter. So when I take it down to the blessing that we give our daughters, that's what I want to give them. I want to give them this blessing. I want to give my students this blessing. That we have so many midot that we want to learn from. So on a general national level, we want to learn from our Arba Imahot, the Imahot that created our nation. We want to learn from their midot. We want to learn from their qualities. But it's not only that. We want to learn from the people around us constantly, from all the beautiful women around us. We could learn from men as well. But essentially, that's what we're telling them in the bracha of our four mothers. That these are the midot that we want to learn from. But we could learn from all the people around us. And when I look at my students, I really, truly look at them at awe. There are so many incredible human beings in this midrasha, past, present, and I know future. And when you look around, you see those who are so good at learning. They are so committed. And those who are so incredibly intelligent, they are so insightful. And those who are devoted and motivated. And those who are kind. And those who are funny and make everyone laugh. And those who are able to rise above their own challenges. And those who help others to rise above theirs. And so many, and so on and so forth. We should constantly have this mindset that when we get blessed on a weekly basis, we get that blessing specifically of our four mothers. We're blessed with those brachot, we're blessed with those traits. But we should also be mindful about the blessings that are around us, the constant qualities that are around us, and we should learn from them. And we should create that beautiful bouquet of flowers that encapsulates all those midot to help us and encourage us to be able to build them within ourselves. And that is what I leave you guys with this bracha. As when I was still, back in the day when I was in Em Bayit and I was known as Mama T in the Midrashah, we started this minhag that every Friday night I would bless all the students as one. I'd say, Simchem Elokim Kesara, Rivka, Rachel Velea. And I'd give them all a blessing. And I'd bless them with the light of Shabbos. And I would tell them how beautiful and radiant they were, which they were. They always were. It's astonishing. And over the years, they really made it even personal, and each one would give their neighbor a bracha to this day. And we added the concept that we have in our home to speak about a light that they see in the one standing or sitting right next to them. And I hope this legacy continues, Be'ezrat Hashem. I'm blessing us all with the blessings of our forefathers, our fathers and our mothers, and all the people around us, Be'ezrat Hashem, for now until eternity. Shabbat Shalom, and all the best.